What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Keep a Hoop podcast. First episode in a while, but we have the playoffs underway, so I wanted to do a episode talking about my predictions, also going over the game ones of each series. So we'll start with the Eastern Conference, the 1-8 matchup, the Sixers-Wizards game. Pretty close game. The Sixers pulled away at the end, but the storyline was Tobias Harris, right? And it was his career high in the playoffs. He played really well, really carried the Sixers in the first half. Joel Embiid was dealing with some foul trouble earlier on in the game, and Tobias just went to work. 37 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. And I think, it's going to continue for a lot of the series. Now, I don't think he's going to average 37 or even average over 30, but I do think he's going to be able to play really well this series. The Wizards overall aren't a great defensive team, and he was going up against Rui Hachimura at times, and Hachimura, as a Japanese guy myself, I'm a big fan of Hachimura, but he just hasn't been able to develop into a great defender yet. I remember earlier on in the year he was guarding KD and he was just sliding everywhere. Granted, guarding KD isn't easy, but I mean he has the potential and the athleticism and the size to become a better defender. And I know, the comparisons to him and Kawhi and the body movements and the types of shots they take and the jump shot and just the way their movements are similar. I know there's comparisons between that, but in terms of the defensive end, it just isn't there yet. It's not even close. So I do think Tobias Harris will have a pretty good series scoring the ball. He has the 3-point shot, the mid-range, and even when he drives. Now, Gafford is a pretty good rim protector, but it's not like he has a lot of size. He's more just off of athleticism. So, with Tobias Harris's strength, he might be able to, score pretty easily at the rim too. So, obviously Embiid's going to play really well when he isn't in foul trouble. I mean, at the end of the game, it was Embiid that did close the game out. Gafford was on him, and it didn't really matter, right? Embiid would post up, get into the paint, and if he caught it at the elbow, he would just jab. Hachimura came over and doubled, but it just didn't matter. Once he gets the ball, there's not much that Wizards can do. I know they put Robin Lopez on him too, but he's just not strong enough, and Embiid was just having his way. And the only way you can really stop him with the personnel that the Wizards have is to try to front and bring help from the backside and try to double him before he catches the ball, before he gets positioned. Because again, once he gets the ball, not much you can do. The problem you run into if you do that, though, is Sixers still have guys like Tobias Harris that we just talked about. You also have Seth Curry, Korkmaz, Danny Green, guys who can knock down 3-point shots. So Washington is in a very tough position. Now, whenever you have guys like Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook, you always have a shot. Westbrook's always going to fight till the end, even if he's not playing well, even if he's not shooting well. He's going to battle. He's going to make it tough on the other team. And Bradley Beal, he can always go off for 50 points on any given night, right? So I do think they have a puncher's chance at not taking the series really, but taking a couple of games off. But I would say that the Sixers win this in 5. I think that, Ben Simmons was doing a really good job on Bradley Beal for the most part. Beal did end up with 33, but he looked frustrated. He made it very difficult on him. And their defense is way better than Washington's defense and Washington's offense even. It really just relies on 2 guys, and it's a lot of iso ball. I think they're going to get worn down. Philadelphia has more depth. And they were the number 1 seed for a reason. So, yeah, I have them winning 4-1 in that series. Then we'll go down to the 4-5 matchup between the Knicks and the Hawks. Really tough loss for the Knicks. What can I say? If you haven't listened to our podcast or watched our videos, I'm a huge Knicks fan. So that was kind of tough to swallow. But, it wasn't anything outside of what I expected. Now, the players who played well and didn't for the Knicks surprised me. We'll get to that in a second. But in terms of it just being a close game, hard fought, close game going down to the wire, because if you look at a lot of the statistics, these two teams are super evenly matched. And I know the head-to-head is very Knicks favored, but Trae Young was injured in one of those games earlier on in the game, and I think DeAndre Hunter missed some of the games as well. So yeah, I mean, the head-to-head is I think kind of a scratch because the Hawks were dealing with a lot of injuries. And if you look at these two teams' records, just ever since the All-Star break, and you look at the Hawks ever since Nate McMillan replaced Lloyd Pierce, and just the Knicks the second half of the season as well. So close series. I gotta just give my props and shout out to Trae Young. I'm not the biggest fan of the way he plays sometimes, but there's no denying the talent he is and how good of a player he is. And again, props to him. He showed up big time last night. I know he debuted his signature shoe from Adidas, went out there to MSG. He was hearing the FU chants, and he shut the Garden up. And if you're a big time player, those are the games you live for. A lot of the big players, if you ask them, they enjoy playing on the road more in big moments and big games because, it feels better to shut up an away crowd than to hear your crowd cheering. And he did it, right? So the Hawks now have home court advantage. And it sucks for the Knicks because they wasted a great opportunity, not just to win a game, but to win a game where, Julius Randle wasn't playing well at all. Probably his worst game of the season. And you get a great game from Alec Burks. Came off the bench, just insane performance from him. Derrick Rose, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin all played really well. So that was a game where you definitely would have loved to have. But, the Hawks did their thing. Bogdanovic hit some really clutch threes. One that looked like it was going to be a steal. He ended up catching it and just let it go from the corner right in front of the Knicks bench. And had another one from the corner on the other side a few minutes before that. So really big plays from the Hawks. And another cool thing about this series is there's so many young players, right? We talked about Trae Young, but also you have, Julius Randle doing his thing, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley. Emmanuel Quickley has some really huge threes, huge plays in the game last night. One of the crowd favorites, fan favorites, for those of you that don't know. And, he really got the crowd going. John Collins was playing well early. We talked about Bogdanovic as well. So good for both of these teams to really come out here and, showcase their young talent. But I do think this goes 7. I'm going to have the Knicks. I know that the Knicks lost, but I'm trying to just speak it into existence, right? Because, again, I need to see, or not need to, but I want to see my Knicks win after being in the playoffs for the first time in 8 years. It was great also hearing, I watched it on TV, I didn't go to the game, but, just hearing the Garden, it was 15,000 at the game, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like, or it sounded like a packed stadium because, the crowds were just showing out. Super loud, was getting into it. But yeah, I'm excited for this series, but I do have the Knicks in 7. But it can go either way. And this is probably going to be the closest series in the first round, maybe not just in terms of how many games it goes, but if you look at point differential stuff. At least that's what I think because again, I do think these two teams are super evenly matched. Now, the one thing I do want to see from the Knicks going forward, I'm not worried about Julius Randle, right? He had a really bad game. It happens to everyone. I think he's going to bounce back. I think he'll be fine because he was getting the shots he was making for the most part in the regular season. They just weren't falling. Again, it happens. Maybe it's jitters. Maybe he just had an off night. I do want to see Elfrid Payton not play. And I know this is something that I've talked about before, and this is something that Knicks fans on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere have talked about. It's just, you're punting those minutes that he plays. And it's the worst thing is he's starting the halves, and you're just starting each half just on a bad note. And it's almost like playing 4v5 because, look, Elfrid Payton is an above average defender against certain matchups. He doesn't do well against athletic or quick, shifty players, right? He does good against size and he puts up a fight, but he just doesn't do well against a guy like Trae. And it kills the Knicks to go into a playoff game where you're wasting. He played 8 minutes yesterday, I think, and those are 8 minutes where you're just putting one of your worst players out there. And I don't know what Tibbs loves about him, but he just continues to stay stubborn about the starting lineup and starting Elfrid in both halves, but it's just not working. And if he's not able to guard Trae, he definitely isn't helping out on offense, right? So if it'd be one thing if he was doing a good job on Trae, because it's like, all right, you can kind of live with that, live with him being kind of a liability on offense. But if he's not doing his job on defense and he's really not adding anything on either end of the floor, I think that you put in Frank Ntilikina, who is a way better shooter. And granted, he doesn't take a lot, but when he does take them, shoots a pretty high percentage from 3. So it at least helps spread the floor out a bit for, Julius Randle and RJ and Derrick Rose when he's on the floor. And Frank, I know he got beat in the closing seconds to give the game-winning basket to Trae, but that's a really hard position to be in, right? You sit the whole game, you're cold, and you get your name called with there was like 9 seconds left. And again, it was bad defense. He opened up to Trae's left side, so Frank's right side, where Nerlens Noel already was. So you don't want to open up to the place where the help already is. And then all Trae had to do was cross over, And Frank, again, because his shoulder had or his hip had already opened up, it was too late for him. Got beat pretty easily. But again, that's a tough position for a player to be in. Not having played a single second that game, I think you let him have the Elfrid Payton minutes, and I think the Knicks are actually fine, in a good position. But again, hats off to the Hawks. Played a really clean game. If you're a Hawks fan, you also not only did you win on the road, you won on the road when Gallinari shot awfully, especially from three. And I think the guys like DeAndre Hunter, Trae Young, Huerter, Bogdanovich, all those guys, the bigs, they're going to be able to do what they did. So for the Knicks, Randall's going to be better. Hopefully Ntilikina plays more. Hopefully Payton plays less. If you're the Hawks, Gallinari should play better. And if everyone else plays the same, they have a shot to win every game as well. So it should be an emotionally draining series, for Knicks fans and Hawks fans. But yeah, I'm going to be pulling my hair out throughout the series. But, again, hats off to the Hawks. The Bucks Heat game, you have, it was a really interesting game because the Bucks won. It was a close game. And Giannis played all right. Like, he didn't play great, right? I mean, he had 26, 18, and 5, and those look like monstrous numbers. But it's another scenario where if you watch the game, he missed some really big free throws down the stretch. And obviously, that's something that people have pointed out as one of his biggest weaknesses throughout his career. And it's going to continue to haunt him, and that was a game where Chris Middleton played pretty well. And thankfully, because they could have very easily lost that game. Now, if you're Miami, the thing you have to say to yourself is we almost won that game despite Jimmy Butler shooting horrendously, like one of his worst shooting nights. And, again, he had 17, 10, and 8. Looks fine on paper, but he shot so badly. And he makes one or two more of those shots, the Heat have a chance to win in regulation. So you have to feel good about yourself, going into it. And, again, they were on the road. The Bucks have home court advantage. If you go by home court advantage, they're supposed to lose that game, right? So it's fine. If you're Miami, I think you're still living, with Bam guarding Giannis, continues to make it really rough on him. And if Jimmy can just find his offense, I think they're going to be in a position again to be able to steal a few games. And still they have the ability to win the series, right? This is a team that beat Milwaukee last year, and granted, Milwaukee is a bit of a different team. I think they're more mentally tough. You have guys like Drew Holiday, PJ Tucker, and I do think this is a better team. But, again, that wasn't a pretty game from Milwaukee either. Chris Middleton bailed Giannis out, really clutch shot at the end, and he played really well throughout the game. I'm not going to take anything away from him. I know I've been critical and have talked about Chris Middleton being not overrated, but overpaid at times. I do think that sometimes he gets too much credit. And again, that's not taking anything away from him. I just don't think that he's a superstar or he's a max contract player, because I don't think if he's the best player on a team, that team is going to be a playoff team. Or even if they were, I don't think they'd be a high-seeded team. So I don't consider him like a top 10, top 15 player. But he's a very good player, right? I've had this argument with people before. Some kid actually tweeted at me after the game winner from, he commented on a tweet from 2 months ago. And we got into the discussion about Chris Middleton being a really clutch, really good playoff player, which I don't agree with. I think he's a really good player, but he averages like 17, 6 and 4 in the playoffs throughout his career, shooting 43%. That's solid, right? But I mean, it's not elite. It's not great. And, you want to talk about clutch again. He's had some clutch shots over his career, and I'll give him that. I remember he also had a really big shot to beat the Celtics, I think in 2018, maybe a few years ago in the playoffs, from really deep as well. So again, he's had his moments, but this season he was 48th in the league in clutch points per game and 244th in field goal percentage in clutch time, right? So I disagreed, but again, really good game from him on Saturday, and shout out to him. For the series though, I have Milwaukee winning in 6. I am a I wouldn't say Heat fan. I do like a lot of players on the team, though. I like Bam. I like Dragic. I like Jimmy Butler. I like Hero. I like Duncan Robinson. I think that's a really well put together team, and I like a lot of their players. But they've been so inconsistent this year. And again, they looked a little bit more, not better against the Bucks, but they kept the game close. And I do think it's going to be 6 close games. I think maybe the Bucks win pretty handily, pretty easily in one of those games, because maybe Giannis just has one of those games or whatever. But I do think that, there's going to be a hard fought series, but I think Milwaukee's a little bit better than last year. They're tougher, and I think Miami's a little worse. So I have Milwaukee winning in 6 in that one. Then you have the last series in the East between the 2nd seed Nets and the 7th seed Celtics. I mean, Boston got out to a really good start, and they kept the game close. I think it was like within 5 at halftime. But there's the talent differential deficit is just too big. And I think the Nets sweep this one. If Jaylen Brown was there, I think the series could go 6. But I think I'd be surprised if Boston wins one. And because you saw that game, the big three came out super cold in that first half. They were struggling to shoot, get their offense going. They looked out of it. They looked lethargic. They just didn't seem like they were on the same page. And then the second half rolls around, it doesn't matter. They combined for like 80 something points. It looked too easy, right? So, I don't think there's much Boston can do. Nets in 4. We can go to the Western Conference where you have the 1-8 series over there. The Jazz Grizzlies. So the Grizzlies won last night. Donovan Mitchell didn't play. They kept him out, I think, for precautionary reasons because Donovan Mitchell told reporters he was ready to go, that he was going to suit up, right? And he didn't play. I think it's not disrespect, but Utah definitely is very confident about being able to beat Memphis. So they said, all right, maybe we can, we could probably win without him. Even if we don't, we can win 4 out of 6 against them if we're healthy. And, that's what they bet on. And was it the right choice? Who knows? But, that's what they went with. I still have Utah winning, and I'm going to say that series goes 6, because I think Donovan Mitchell has missed a lot of time. So I don't think he's going to come back and just be immediately the Donovan Mitchell we saw earlier on in the season. I think it's going to take a game or two to really get back. But I think Utah's going to be fine. I do have Utah winning in 6, 4-2. Clippers Mavs. Now this is a big series because the Mavs gave the Clippers some trouble last year, and the Clippers ended up winning that series. But Luka had the game winner, and he just he seems to really play well against the Clippers. Now Ty Lue's talked about how Kawhi has to do so much on offense, so he doesn't want him using up his energy guarding Luka, which would usually be fine because you have Paul George, and Paul George is a very good defender himself. But Paul George, for some reason, seems to just not be able to guard Luka at all. And again, I know Luka's a really good player. Don't get me wrong. Like, stopping him is very hard for any player, right? But Paul seems to not even have a clue how to do it. Like, he seems to get burned by Luka. And he's not the only one guarding Luka. He's not guarding Luka the whole game. But even when he does, it seems like they don't really have an answer for him. And I don't know if Kawhi, I think Kawhi might do better, but I don't know. He just seems to play really well against them, man. And look, Kawhi didn't shoot great in that game. Paul George actually played really well, and I know everybody's going to still talk about playoff P and pandemic P, and the Paul George jokes are going to continue probably until he wins a ring, or if he ever wins a ring. But which is unfortunate, right? Because a lot of times in today's age of social media and things going viral, if you get labeled one thing, you kind of just have that label stuck onto you until you win it all, right? And I think it'd be fine if you're a guy like Kobe or Russ, where you can kind of just tune things like that out and just, mind your own business and worry about you. But Paul George seems to kind of be impacted by all those things. He's come out and talked about, not caring, but it does seem to impact him. So that's something that does worry about me. I do still have the Clippers winning this series, but I do think it goes 7. Maybe 6. I'm gonna go 7 though. I don't know. The Clippers just don't ever seem like mentally there in the playoffs. Again, Paul George has had his trouble in the playoffs, and it seems like ever since he left Indiana, which is weird because you should get better in the playoffs as you have more experience, as you get better. He's become a better player since his Indiana days for sure. But in the playoffs, we remember not just what happened last year in the epic, collapse they had, but when he got beat by Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz in the first round. He played really bad in that closing game, and people kind of forget about that. But he just hasn't played that well consistently in the playoffs for a couple years now. And it's not even like the whole playoffs overall is bad. He just has really bad moments and games. So that is something that we need to differentiate. But he should be playing better in the playoffs. Max Kellerman always, and I don't want to quote Max Kellerman because he has his share of questionable takes. But, he talks about, and granted, other people talk about this too, but you should be able to raise your play in the playoffs if you're that guy, right? Like if you're a star. And Paul George has the talent to be that guy. He's got the wingspan, the size, the athleticism, the shooting, the ball handling, like in the defense. I mean, he has the talent to be a top 5 level player in the world, and he's not, right? He just isn't. There are times where he shows glimpses of it, but that's what's frustrating for people. And I think he gets in his own head. He stops himself sometimes, but he doesn't raise his play. He sometimes, and a lot of times, doesn't even play the same way in the playoffs, and it gets worse. Not significantly worse, but that is something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I mean, I think as great as Luka is, Kristaps Porzingis still looked pretty bad. I think Luka just needs a bit more help. I don't see them winning the series. I think with Rondo and other guy, Terrence Mann, the Clippers have a bit more depth and they do have some more leadership and experience and veterans. And I think that they end up eking that one out 4-3. But I do think it goes 7. You have the Nuggets, Blazers. This is another one, kind of like the Knicks Hawks. It's just a really evenly matched series, I think. I mean, I think these two teams are, neither of them are great defensively. If Jamal Murray was healthy, Nuggets probably win in 5 or 6. I think that the Nuggets team, once they got Murray or when they had Murray and then Aaron Gordon came, that team looked so dangerous. MPJ has stepped up, especially at the end of the regular season, to be that number 2 guy, but he struggled a little bit shooting the ball, and we need to see if he can be that number 2 guy in the playoffs, because it's different than doing it at the end of the regular season. So we'll see if he can really answer that call and be that consistent number 2 threat, because Jokic is going to need help. Will Barton's not back yet. Aaron Gordon isn't really a third offensive threat. Campazzo played pretty well, but Portland, I mean, they've been there, done that, especially with their core of Dame, CJ, and Nurkic. They've played in a lot of playoff games together, gone through some runs, and they have that chemistry. And not that the Nuggets don't, right? But they aren't as close of a, not like off the court close, but they don't have that same chemistry anymore, because before you had everyone who's been in that role and situation before, right? You had MPJ, who had improved. You have Jamal Murray and Jokic. But now, like, everybody has to step up one spot in the depth chart and just everything they have to do, right? And it's not like the past where they had Will Barton and also Gary Harris, guys who've been there with that team and just kind of experienced everything. So I really don't know, man. Like, this series, I think, goes 7, and I think it can go either way. I think Portland wins in 7. I think that MPJ is just a year away from being that consistent number 2 guy, and I think that they just lack help for Jokic. And I think Dame, CJ, and Nurkic, I think, is actually a pretty good matchup for Jokic. And granted, he didn't stop Jokic, and not many people can, but he's at least big enough and can offer some resistance. And I think he played pretty well offensively as well. So I think that team's gonna just fight it out. But again, I think it can go either way. So, and then you have the Suns Lakers. Man. So the Suns game, that was actually a really fun game to watch, first of all. Another arena that hadn't seen playoff basketball in a few years, and it was really nice to see. That city really needed it, and you could tell, especially in that first quarter, that crowd was just going nuts, man, and it was so fun to watch. The Chris Paul injury is the biggest thing to keep an eye on, right? It might have been the biggest headline of yesterday's games. Obviously, again, Trae Young had the huge game and whatnot, but I mean, there's so much to really pay attention there, and it's if this team, if Chris Paul can be 80%, 85, 90% of himself, I have the Suns winning. I really think the Suns can pull this out, and I think it goes 7. But if Chris Paul isn't, and he didn't look healthy at all, because after that injury, he was losing the ball a lot, losing his dribble, bad passes, couldn't, explode on mismatches, couldn't get any spacing, couldn't get to his spots. Those are all things Chris Paul is very good at, and it's not like, if he was like just missing shots, like, oh, maybe he just had an off game or whatever. But I mean, you're talking about one of the best point guards who's ever played the game. He's not going to lose his dribble as many times as he did, or just struggle that much to get to a spot and get his, or create spacing the way he did yesterday. So I don't know, like the day off's going to help a little bit, but we'll see how severe the injury was. He definitely didn't look right. Had to go to the locker room twice right after the injury. So and I'm sure the Lakers, Frank Vogel being a defensive coach and the Lakers being a good defensive team, they're definitely going to change some things up on Devin Booker, especially knowing that Chris Paul is compromised. And I think that the big thing for the Lakers, right, is AD just needs to show up. Now, LeBron didn't play great. He still was at least a positive in the plus minus section, and just didn't get a lot of help. Now, I'm not bailing LeBron out because I don't think he played well either. I think he could have been more aggressive. He was a little bit passive, and I think he settled for jump shots too many times, and just didn't look like he was 100%. And granted, he probably isn't, right? The ankle is still bothering him, but I think it really showed, and he can definitely play better, and I'm sure he knows that. But the key is Anthony Davis, because he got outplayed by DeAndre Ayton, and it wasn't even close. Ayton had more offensive rebounds than AD had total rebounds. And Ayton just wanted it more. It wasn't like, he just out-finessed it. Like, he just wanted it more. Those rebounds, putbacks, contests. I mean, it was just crazy. And DeAndre Ayton, I'm very proud of, and very, a lot of respect to him, because he came into the league as someone who people kind of question his maturity and dedication and commitment to the game, but he's extremely talented. But he's taken a lesser role this year. There are times where he only gets 8-9 shots, and he hasn't complained at all this year. Now, granted, winning helps, and you have a guy like Chris Paul, you have veterans like that, and it definitely helps. But, I mean, he's just been fully about the team, and he showed yesterday, again, just how talented he is. And, I don't think that he can keep it up, not because he's not able to, but because I think the Lakers and AD really step up defensively. But I mean, he played really well yesterday, and again, props to him. What else happened? I mean, the Andre Drummond minutes were funny. Everyone complained. I don't like everyone, on social media and the news outlets and these, pundits from ESPN and Fox Sports or whatever. They made a big deal about the Lakers getting Andre Drummond. I thought it was just an over-exaggerated or overrated move. I really did. I think Andre Drummond put up a lot of empty, useless numbers for bad teams in the past couple years. He doesn't have great hands. Isn't a good defender. He just clogs the lane up for LeBron and AD. I didn't see what the big deal was about, and I think Lakers fans and just NBA fans in general saw just how disruptive for the Lakers, ironically enough, he can be. And does his do his minutes go down? I don't know, right? It's kind of like the Elfrid Payton situation with the Knicks and Thibodeau. Like, Vogel's been pretty adamant on continuing to play Drummond. We'll see if he makes any adjustments, but my prediction, and I think everyone else's prediction on this series, is going to be the same as mine, which is it really depends on Chris Paul, right? Again, if he's healthy, or at least closer to it, I do think the Suns have a really good shot to beat the Lakers, because they can't stop Devin Booker, right? They were able to kick out to open shooters, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and again, if Chris Paul is able to hit a few more shots, that game turns into a double-digit game. Granted, LeBron and AD, again, will play better probably throughout the series, but this Lakers team isn't the same team from last year. They're still good defensively, but AD and LeBron are a year older, and they've gone through more injuries. And, some people argue that the bubble helped them. I'm neutral on that, no comment really. But, with the health and just them being a year older, this team just isn't the same. They're not as scary. But knowing what we know right now about Chris Paul's shoulder, he's going to play in game 2. He said so. But just seeing how he played in game 2, I have the Lakers in 7, which sucks for Chris Paul because he deserves better luck in the playoffs. But I just, until I see him play better and more healthy, I can't say I'm going to pick the Suns. One thing I do want to talk about real quick, I think that flagrant, or that the double technical on Cam Payne was so weird yesterday, on Cameron Payne, because it was like, I was talking with a few of my friends about this, and it's like, I really don't think that a player should get double technicals in one confrontation unless you do something like so absurd or just like over the top, right? Because he shoved Alex Caruso and then he threw the ball. I don't think that like you should get 2 technicals for that, because it's like if somebody throws or somebody pushes someone, right? Let's say a shove is usually warrants a technical, right? You shove someone and then you shove again. It's usually not 2 technicals if it's happening within one confrontation, right? So I feel like, yes, throwing a ball on its own is a technical usually, and so is shoving. But if it's in one confrontation, unless like it's super, unnecessary or super extra, I feel like the double technical there was just unnecessary, especially in a playoff game. You're talking about a call that could have possibly, and it didn't, but that could have possibly changed the course of the game. And I think if I'm a ref, that's the last thing I want to do is change the course of a game with a call like that. And I think it was a bad call. I think it was too much, but that's just my take on that. So again, this is my first podcast episode, on the playoffs. So we're gonna do, real quick, continue to go down the bracket and make predictions, right? And we'll update these as we go along, or as the playoffs continue to unfold. So we had the Sixers and Knicks moving on in the upper half of the Eastern Conference bracket. I have the Sixers in 5. Now, the Knicks actually played the Sixers all right in a couple of games this season. Really close games, but I think, and I like, Nerlens Noel has been really good for the Knicks, but I don't think he can contain Joel Embiid, and I don't think Taj Gibson can either. Simmons is going to do probably a pretty solid job guarding Julius Randle, and I think the Knicks just lack the firepower to beat Philly's offense. But I think they can probably steal a game. You have I took the Bucks Nets. That's gonna be a really fun series because the Nets trying to put a wall in front of Giannis, with guys like Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan if he plays, and Claxton, who isn't close to being strong enough to contain Giannis. Is gonna be really fun to watch, right? It might be some crazy games from Giannis, because they don't have that one guy. And I don't think any team has a guy like the Heat do in Bam Adebayo that can actually contain Giannis by himself as well as he does. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be... I mean, I'm still going to pick the Nets because I just think they still have too much firepower. I mean, it's going to be a fun matchup because outside of that, I mean, you still have, Harden probably guarding... I assume KD is going to get some minutes on Middleton, but KD is going to be guarding Giannis. You have Harden on Middleton, which I don't think is that fun of a matchup, as at least compared to Giannis, KD. And then you have Jrue Holiday, Kyrie, which I think from a basketball standpoint should be really fun to watch. You have a great offensive isolation player, and then you have one of the best individual perimeter defenders in the league in Jrue Holiday. So that should be really fun. And hopefully Jrue Holiday can take advantage of Kyrie's defense or lack thereof and be pretty aggressive on that end as well. But I have the Nets winning in 7 in that one. So you just finish out the Eastern Conference. You have the Nets against the Sixers. I have Nets winning in 6. I think Joel Embiid is going to average like 32, 33, 34 that series. Nobody really can stop Joel, but especially on the Nets. The Nets have struggled with interior defense all season. Claxton is way too weak. DeAndre Jordan was dominated by Joel Embiid, and Blake Griffin's not going to really be able to stop him either. So I think Joel Embiid ends up playing really well, but I think the Nets, again, just have too much firepower. And look, I'm not a Nets fan. I'm a Knicks fan, so I hate the Nets. I don't want them to win, but I think it's so hard to. And I know and James Harden struggled, or had his struggles in the playoffs in the past. But I think that team just has too much firepower, too much star power, not to make the finals. And if they don't make the finals, if they don't win it all, it's probably going to be a failure of a season. But I really do think the only thing that can stop them, at least in the East, or maybe the whole league, is just it's injuries. And I think if they can stay healthy and continue to improve on their chemistry, because again, the big three hasn't played. They haven't played too many games together, right? But if they continue to build on, and they should only improve on that. That team's really scary, right? So we go to the West. Jazz, Clippers. I have the Clippers winning in 6. I don't know. The Jazz just aren't that scary of a 1 seed to me. Blazers, Lakers, or Suns. But I think whoever wins the Suns-Lakers series still beats Portland. I think they win in 6. I think 6. Because, again, the Lakers, I think even if they're just not as scary as they were last season, so I think Portland could take a game or two off of them. I think maybe it just only goes 5, because maybe Portland doesn't match up too well with the Lakers. But I think the Suns still have a shot to beat the Blazers. Granted, Chris Paul continues to, get his shoulder right. So then you have, what is that? Let's say Suns or Lakers versus the Clippers. I'll say Lakers just because, that's not who I picked because of the Chris Paul situation. But if it's the Lakers-Clippers, man, that's what everyone wanted to see last year, right? You finally get it. I think the Clippers just, I don't know, maybe I think it's a mental thing again, but I think the Lakers win that one in 6. So you have Lakers against the Nets, and then I think the Nets win in 6. I don't want the Lakers or the Nets to win. If the Lakers can just get right, get healthy, which is still a big if, right? Because again, they are hurt, they are older, they're not the same team as they were last year. But I'm counting on it because of the personnel, because of the leadership, because of that franchise. But if they can get there, they're still a good team, right? We saw how good they were before the injuries racked up. So if they can get even close to that, I think that they can still get to the finals. But I think the Nets, again, just they've been healthier longer. Not even, but their injuries weren't as recent, I guess, outside of Harden, right? And they have 3 guys instead of the 2. And yeah, I think the Lakers just run out of gas, and I think the Nets win it. But again, I don't. It hurts me to say that because I hate to see either team win. But it's not a hot take or anything, right? Those are still probably the favorites to win. It's hard to count LeBron out. I've done it in the past. I won't lie, and I've been proven wrong multiple times. And again, with the Nets' star power and firepower, it's hard to put my money against them, right? But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited. Having the fans back in all these arenas is great, especially in the playoffs. It's just different, right? The bubble, I think the NBA did a great job of it. I've been vocal of that. I think that they did a really good job of putting things together in such a limited time and really making sure everybody was safe, and it went down really smoothly. But it's really different, man, in the playoffs once you have that atmosphere and the crowds and I'm just watching at home. I'm not even in the arenas, but I mean it's still different. So pretty good round of games so far. We have I think Heat Bucks tonight. I have the Heat winning that one. I think Jimmy Butler bounces back, which would give the Heat home court advantage. And then you have the Nuggets Blazers, and I think the Nuggets bounce back and take that one. But hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you are watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube, I guess, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Everyone, please follow us on our social media pages. It is Keep It Hoop blog on Twitter and keep_it_hoop on Instagram. We'll probably do another podcast on Friday to catch up and review the round of games that we're going to have this week. Hopefully I'll be able to come out with a video either tomorrow or Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, we will see you guys soon. Peace.